I always have problems with mics. It takes me a while. I should have seen me last week. I was like, kept dropping it. It was a mess. Perfect timing. We knew this was going to happen, right? This is why I always have handheld mics, I guess. Okay. It's secure. I don't know about you all, but during Lent, I always end up failing at whatever I've chosen to give up. I'm terrible at it. I always end up compromising something. A few years, several actually, I've tried to give up sweets. This is never successful. So I make a compromise with myself and God, and I say, okay, I'll just have one little piece of candy a day, and then I'll be good the rest of the day. And I'll make it through the 6 weeks. That usually works. I've also tried giving up coffee a couple of times. And again, I can't get through writing my papers or exams. I need a little bit of caffeine. And so I compromise. Again, me and God, we have a conversation and we agree, or at least I think we agree, for just 1 cup of coffee a day, just one, and I'll be okay. One year, I decided I was going to give up all meat, everything, no fish, nothing. If it had eyes on it, except for potatoes, because potatoes have eyes, I wouldn't eat it. Well, as you can tell, I've already said I'm not good at this. I ended up dreaming of chicken. I just had these recurring dreams of this great chicken. And so I talked to God again, made a compromise. I could eat chicken, and that was the only thing that I ate. I am not successful at giving things up for Lent. And I know that it's funny to think about, but in practice, what ends up happening to me is I feel like I'm really not quite being a good enough Christian. I feel like I'm a compromised Christian. I start to wonder, am I truly acting as a person of faith? Am I following the words of Jesus? Am I doing what God has called me to? How can I follow God's call for my life if I can't give up candy, coffee, and chicken for 40 days? That's it, 40 days, and I can't make it. Honestly, I start to think of myself like that fig tree from the Luke passage. Year after year, Lent after Lent, I'm not producing any fruit. I'm outwardly and I'm ornamentally Christian. I'm alive, but I'm not producing anything. I think this also can relate to what was happening to the believers in Pergamum in the Revelation passage this morning. They receive a letter from John of Patmos and are reminded that despite the good they have done, they are compromised. Their faith has been compromised. Pergamum is a city that would be located in the country of Turkey. And at this time, when the letter was written to them, it was the seat of Roman administration in Asia. That's why John makes this reference to where Satan's throne is. This Roman authority is Satan. John is directly addressing the power of the Roman government that is central to the people who live and work in Pergamum. These Christian believers, most of who we think are of Jewish origin, had been conquered by the Romans, and now they were surrounded by a government and other people who were following Roman gods. And if being a colonized people and being isolated by their faith is not a difficult enough way to live, they have lost one of their own community members, Antipas, who had been killed for following his faith. There's no doubt that the people in Pergamum were fearful to live out their faith fully. It must have been a difficult time for them when they receive a letter that tells them they have been faithful, but not quite faithful enough. They also remind me of that fig tree, living, but not bearing fruit. For the church of Pergamum, they are being told that they are not faithful to the message of God. They have received it, but aren't experiencing it, living it out. Instead, they're following other messages like that of Balaam and Balak, or the Nicolaitans. Balaam is a direct reference to a man from the Old Testament. He was called to be a prophet for God. And instead of working for the Israelites, he was paid off by another group of people to prophesy for them. In other words, what he was doing was, instead of using the gifts God gave him for God and God's people, he was using his gifts to gain his own wealth. The church in Pergamum is doing this very same thing. Instead of using their gifts for God and God's people, they are using it for their own gain. Isn't it possible that we, at times, are using Lent in this same way? Why would I choose to give up candy and coffee and meat? Was I giving these things up only to appear like a better Christian? Lent is supposed to be a time of repentance, fasting, preparation for Easter, for the coming Christ. Lent should also be a time of self-reflection and focus on my relationship with God. If I give something up for Lent, shouldn't it make me not just look like a better Christian, but shouldn't whatever I give up be creating space in my life for me to give more of myself to God and God's people? I can't say that I've done that. I get so caught up in acting out Lent, in giving up the candy and the coffee and trying to outwardly and ornamentally be a Christian, that I don't think that I'm truly following the words of Jesus. When John addresses the Pergamum Christians, he tells them that Christ comes to us with a sharp, double-edged sword. This sharp, double-edged sword is the words of Jesus. I recall the words of Jesus to Peter in John 21. "Feed my lambs, take care of my sheep." This is what Jesus tells us shows our love for him, for God. This shows our faithfulness when we care and provide for God's people. As we reflect and focus on God during Lent, we must challenge ourselves and ask if what we are practicing during Lent is truly what Jesus calls us to, or is it similar to the actions of the Pergamum believers? Do our actions for Lent serve us, or do they serve God? This is the question we are challenged with this morning as we consider how we live out our faith during the Lenten season. The question again is really, could be said, are we bearing fruit, or are we a fruitless fig tree? We have 3 weeks left of this Lenten season, and as we enter into the second half of this time, together, let's challenge each other to do more than just give up candy and coffee, but to recognize the places and the ways that individually and as a community, we are not following the words of Jesus. Where are the places that we are compromising our faith? And what would happen if instead of having a faith that benefits us, we have a faith that serves God and God's people? During these last 3 weeks of Lent, together, let's begin to show the signs of budding fruit, preparing for our coming Christ on Easter. I'd like us to consider this as we sing together the song, "Lord, I Want to Be a Christian." I think we're going to get the words up there, hopefully. But if not, I'll remind you. The words are, Lord, I want to be a Christian in my heart, in my heart. Lord, I want to be a Christian in my heart. Lord, I want to be a Christian in my heart, in my heart. Lord, I want to be a Christian in my heart. In my heart, in my heart. Lord, I want to be a Christian in my heart. Let's keep singing. Lord, I want